What's up, y'all? Thanks for joining me for yet another Lawns Across America podcast. In this one, we're going to talk a little bit more about seeding lawns up north, but I'm also going to talk to my warm season friends about why we don't seed and some advantages that our lawns have. I'm also going to take some time and go into the very popular subject of pre-germinating grass seed and give you my thoughts about it. Then I'm going to answer a question about weed and feeds and feeding the weeds, as well as talk about strategies for getting rid of sod webworm and armyworm that are all over the country. All this and a whole lot more on this week's podcast. Let's get into it. What's up, y'all? I'm Alan Hain, the Lawn Care Nut. Thanks for coming back for yet another Lawns Across America podcast. Can you guys believe it? I think this is 5 in a row. So thank you so much for coming back. Thank you so much for joining in. Was actually over in Orlando this previous week here at it's called The Landscape Show. It's Florida's big landscape show. And our friends from Ecologel. So I don't know if y'all know this, but Ecologel, they're the makers of Hydratane. And so you guys know I've worked with them for a long time, Florida-based company, and they were over there. But their parent company is called ArborJet, and they're also there. And they have a lot of customers that come to this show, and they make a lot of good, because that's what it is. It's a trade show for landscapers here in Florida. They make a lot of good contacts there. And this is the first time I've ever been to that show. They invited me to come over, so that was really nice. And I made some really good contacts, which I'll be talking about later. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about ArborJet, because I actually worked with ArborJet technology back when I worked for TruGreen. So when I worked for TruGreen out of Chicago, I lived in Northwest Indiana, and I worked at the Crestwood branch most of the time, which is south side of Chicago, south suburbs. I worked in Hickory Hills, which is kind of southwest suburbs. I worked in Park Ridge, which is north suburbs, and then I worked in Merrillville, Indiana, which is northwest Indiana, but also part of that whole Chicago region. Those were the main branch offices I worked in. But during my time there, we had two threats come through the area that were threatening trees. And what those threats were, the first one was the Asian longhorn beetle, and I can't remember which trees that one affected, because when that happened, or when that problem came through, I was newer in the company, and so I wasn't privy to that type of, I didn't care about that stuff. I was just newer in the company when that kind of went through. I was doing other things. But when the emerald ash borer came through, which was the second one, I was a general manager of the Hickory Hills branch at that time, and so I had a revenue opportunity there, so I did care. And then obviously onward after that, I became the region commercial sales manager for Chicago. And then I really had a revenue opportunity there, because most of the accounts that we would sell to protect the ash trees from the emerald ash borer were commercial accounts. Sometimes homeowners would pay, but typically no. And so as a region commercial sales manager for Chicago, the emerald ash borer problem in the trees was a revenue opportunity for us. And the technology we used was ArborJet. Now, they have vastly improved. So this would have been, let me give you a year for this. This would have been 2000, and if I'm wrong on this, y'all can correct me. The Asian longhorn was I don't know the year on that, but the emerald ash borer, I remember being maybe because it kind of migrated from the east. I remember when it hit Michigan, they kept saying it's going to be in Chicago, so start doing your preventatives. And then when it came, you could do certain things. I want to say it was the peak of it was 2007, 8, 9, 10, maybe. I left TruGreen in 2012, and there was still revenue for it, but it was kind of maybe on the backside, too late for a lot of cases. So that's the years we're talking about. We'll just say 2008, 9, because that's really the time when I think it was at its peak. But what ArborJet does is they make injection systems, and they also then sell the product too. And I think they have some of their own proprietary products as well. But they're they have other technology too. But the technology I worked with from ArborJet was tree injections, and you drilled into the tree, and then you set a plug in there, and then you use their technology to inject the tree with the chemical, and it goes in fast. The xylem and the phloem in these trees is moving faster than you would think, and it kind of pulses, and it takes the insecticide right into the tree, and it gets into the tree and goes up, and then with the emerald ash borer, we would actually put a metal medallion on the tree, so you'd know, and they had to be marked, because this was like a pretty big deal. It was wiping out ash trees in the city of Chicago and around. In fact, a lot of you have dealt with this because I'm pretty sure it's made its way all the way through Nebraska by now because it's an insect, so it moves. I would be curious if you're on YouTube, if you could leave comments about your dealings with emerald ash borer. I know that the majority of the ash trees in the Chicagoland area have died or been replaced. What happened was, this is very interesting, and y'all are going to call it something different, but in Chicago we called them parkways. So the park strip between the sidewalk and the street that the city owns, we called those parkways. And in the parkways, they had planted ash trees. And in fact, in the suburbs of Chicago, ash trees were overplanted to the point where it became almost a monoculture. And in fact, it was in some neighborhoods. You'd have 100% ash trees in the parkways. And so when something like emerald ash borer comes through and you're a neighborhood, a homeowners association of 300 homes or 500 or 600 homes or whatever, and you have 100% of your homes have large ash trees out in front, mature ash trees that are going to die, you have to decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to pay a company like TruGreen, because we were licensed to do this, and that's where because the same license that you use to spray trees and shrubs is the same license that you use to spray lawns. Now, there's specialties, but the general test that you take, the general license that you get in Illinois and Indiana, they do reciprocals one way and not the other. But the general test you take allows you to apply pesticides, and then you get specialties like right of way or ornamental tree and turf and ornamental, tree and ornamental. It's been a while since I've done this, so I'm not up on the different terminology. But you get specialties, right? You get ongoing education, right? And so you could spray trees and shrubs, but a lot of times the same product that you would use to spray the trees and shrubs can also be injected. And that's what ArborJet does, is they make technology. And if you're on YouTube, I'll get some different, I'll find some B-roll from around and put on, because I always try to do that to the YouTube videos. I try to give some sort of B-roll to give you guys visuals of this, but it's they have different technology that you can inject the tree, and the insecticides go in, and if there's emerald ash borer in there, EAB, and you've determined that they're not bad enough, it'll kill them in the tree. You can also trunk spray to back them up. There's a lot of different things you can do, but the main thing we were doing was preventatives, right? Go to that HOA that's got those 300 homes, and they've all got 2 mature ash trees out front, and you give them an estimate. Hey, it's 70, 80, 50, $90 a tree. It was based on DBH, diameter at breast height. You'd have to go out and measure all the trees, or what you would do in a subdivision, you wouldn't measure all of them, but you'd go take a representative sample of the trees around and do an average, and then you'd bid. It's going to be $90 a tree. So you got to just to do math, and if I'm remembering right, $90 a tree was about right for some of these trees in Chicago. Some were cheaper in the smaller neighborhoods. It would be about $60 a tree. This is for us to inject them, and I can't remember what product we used from ArborJet, but ArborJet would supply not only the technology to inject the trees, but we would buy the chems from them. And then we would go around, and I believe it was between $60 and $90 a tree, 60 for the younger ones, 90 for the bigger ones, mature ones. So let's do a little math. If we had 300 houses, and each had 2 ash trees, that's 600 ash. I used to do that a lot when I would give estimates. I would say, man, you guys got a lot of nice ash out there. 90 nice ash. $90 times 300 houses times 2, 600 trees. So $54,000 bid. And that was about what we would do. Those were the average bids. When I worked in the commercial department and I was the commercial sales manager, we'd bid EAB for subdivisions. That would be about what it was, 54,000 or so, up to 100,000. And so what they would have to do is they'd have to decide, if you're an HOA, are we going to do an assessment on our homeowners to save the ash trees? Because the city, even though some of these were in parkways, city-owned, the city would not do anything. The city would kind of wash their hands of it in some cases. Every city was different. Every town was different. And that's what it was, too. Sometimes we'd be giving the bid actually to the town. We won some pretty big, I think it was Naperville. I think Naperville's one. I didn't win that one, but my guy Tony, I think, did down there in Naperville. Some pretty big ones where the municipalities really invested big bucks in saving their ash trees. Or some they would save the main ash trees, say, around their town square, and they wouldn't save all of them in the town. Or sometimes they would leave it up to the HOA to pay for it. Sometimes they would allow individual homeowners to do it too. Some towns, if your individual homeowner wanted to do it, the town had a registry, and you would go and you would pay that way to save your 2 ash trees. And then other towns, what they would do is they would do the math, and they would realize it was actually cheaper. This was before the EAB got to the area when we were talking about prevention. some towns did they did the math and they realized, well, we could actually go around now, starting now, and cut down, say, 10 trees a week for the next 40 weeks, and we'll cut 400 down, and then replace them with something else, like a honey locust was a big one they would do, or a pin oak maybe, or whatever other what's the other one that's overplanted? Bradford pears. Holy shnikes! I think there's stories about those things escaping and taking over. Anyway, they would replant with some other plant or other tree that was not susceptible to EAB, right? And so some towns found it cheaper to do that, to just go and cut them down before the EAB even got there, and then replant with something small. Some did combinations. It was just very interesting. But that's how I was introduced to ArborJet. So I just think it's really cool, and that I think it's really, it's a couple things. I think it's really cool. Number one, that I now work with a company that's like their sister company, Ecologel and Hydrotane. We're one of the largest, I think, we're one of the largest distributors of Hydrotane. Yard Mastery is definitely on the internet. We are. And, we do a lot of really awesome content. We work really well together with them. And it's just a great partnership that we've had for a long time with Ecologel and the Hydrotane product, and now Foreplay. But the ArborJet stuff is super cool. And I think it's neat that I get to work with them. And one of the nights of the conference, I was invited to go to dinner with the CEO of ArborJet, Russ, and a couple of their clients. So not necessarily Hydrotane users, but tree clients of theirs that use the ArborJet equipment. And one of the companies, the company that was there, they are in Bradenton. They're in Bradenton, which is where I live. They're called Conceptually Green. And I'm pretty sure they set it up that way on purpose. They invited me to dinner that night with them because they knew that would be a good contact for me, because I'm sitting here thinking, this is it. Now, what Conceptually Green does, they use the ArborJet products, but they inject palm trees. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many questions for y'all, because I don't know, I know almost nothing about palms except that, foxtails love nitrogen. That's about all I know. If you get palm frizzle, you give them manganese. And I just know in my area where I live, North River, where we have clay, a lot of clay, we have to give our palms manganese or they'll turn yellow. That's all I know. But there's all different, there's diseases in palms. There's insects in palms, things I have no idea about that I get asked about a lot. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad y'all put me together with them. And so I'm probably too aggressive. I'm coming out with y'all. I want to come out on a truck. I want to go right here. I want you to come to my house. I'm like, and I mean, when I'm saying that, meaning like I want to do content with you all, because they see the value too, right? They see the value of saying, well, if Alan's going to come out and do content for us, and he has a pretty big Florida audience, which I do, maybe we'll get some business too, right? And I will. So that this is a good partnership, or a good contact for me, that I can go out and get awesome content, right, about stuff that I have no idea about, but that's really relevant to a good portion of my audience. And even those of you that listen to this that live up north, it's still cool to learn about like diseases and insects and palms, I think. I watch all kinds of stuff on different gardening and plantings and things about that I'll never grow, but I just love watching them. I like to learn things like Summer Rain Oaks. Y'all ought to watch her stuff on YouTube. I learn about stuff that I would never do, but it's so cool to just watch and learn. And I think you guys would be interested in learning about palms and the diseases in palms. And so I'm really looking forward to going out with Nick, that's my producer, my filmer, and going out and doing some in the field stuff with those guys and learning more about palms. And that's all due to ArborJet. I'm on and so that was just cool. Now I'm on the ArborJet site, and it looks like they do those air blasters. Man, I should do a little bit more research. Products, do they do those? They do. Supersonic air knife, pneumatic soil excavation. And that's the other thing. These guys told me that there's another person in Bradenton here that does, another company that does this supersonic air knife stuff. If you guys have never seen videos on this, holy shnikes. It is the coolest thing. I've seen it where they air knife around trees that have compaction problems, and they can aerate it literally, and then put in fresh soil and amendments and things like that. And I think that this company there that they also know that does the air knifing. When I was at the show, there was an olive tree that's 100 years old that had been removed and balled and burlapped and was at the show for sale. And $9,000, $8,000 you could buy it for. I was like, oh my gosh, if I had $8,000, I would buy, because this is an olive tree, right? So we're talking like Garden of Gethsemane kind of stuff. and it looks like that. Looks like those, and not those are like 700 or 800 years old in the Garden of Gethsemane. By the way, if you ever go there to Israel and you go to the Garden of Gethsemane, those are not the same olive trees that were there when Christ was there, but they are 500 to 700 years old. So anyway, they had a big olive tree that was rescued there. I don't know if it was this same company, but there was another display of some other very large, like I call them heirloom type trees that are mature, that I think they save them when a subdivision's going in somewhere or urban sprawl, and there's a I'm going to say heirloom tree, a tree that's a granddaddy that you don't want to get rid of. This company goes in there and they can air knife them out and save them and transplant them. And I'm like, holy cow. They had one where they had a picture of it on a barge. And I'm like, and I think those people are in Bradenton too. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, so I have not reached back out to them since I've been back yet, because they've been busy because they were at the show. And so they've been busy and I've been busy, but and they're actually traveling after the show to do some different things. And I was like, we'll get together sometime in October. So I think that will make incredible winter content and something I'm looking forward to learning about. And obviously air knifing, I think we get some views on the old TikTok overbiter. So, it seems like a cornucopia of fun things and fun activities and really cool content coming up. So I'm hoping that I can put that stuff together, but that was kind of some excitement that I had this week around Lawn Care Nut HQ Overbiter. All right, y'all, so this part of the podcast is sponsored by me, Yard Mastery. Wanted to let you know that for the Labor Day weekend here, actually through Tuesday if you're listening, we'll have all the Greene County fertilizer gallons, quarts, and 2.5s on sale, 10% off, as well as all of our fertilizers. Get some Flagship, get your Stress Blend, try out your Double Dark or your Freedom 1776. All of those also 10% off. No coupon codes to use this time. We tried that coupon code thing this year, and y'all just didn't like it. You pretty much told us. So it's just straight up sales, easy peasy. Go down, click the link. If you're on YouTube, I'll give you a link in the description below for you to click. All the stuff's 10% off. We also have some couple bags of grass seed on sale, soil test kits if you need to pick those up, Prodiamine, Soil Fit. If you haven't heard of 803 Soil Fit, for those of you that like doing the nitrogen blitz in the fall, I got ammonium sulfate in there. I'll tell you what, natural based, beautiful color you get from that. Great for your nitrogen blitz, all that stuff. 10% off. Just click the link below or go to yardmastery.com. Sale goes through Tuesday, and I'd like to thank you for supporting an American small business, and I'll see you in the lawn. All right, I wanted to take one quick minute here and mention the passing of an icon in the do-it-yourself space, and especially when it comes to the do-it-yourself space and our little niche here of gardening, landscaping, and lawn care. I'm talking about Roger Cook. Roger Cook from, you guys remember this old house. He was the landscaper representative there, the green guy. You had Bob Vila, and you had was Norm on there, and then who was the young guy? Anyway, I don't know all the names. I should, but I know Roger Cook. Roger Cook was the This Old House landscaper, and he had the very thick and distinctive Boston accent, which was just part of his charm and incredible. So he passed away last week, and so that's a big one, man. That hits home for us. I'm sure many of you that listen to this were inspired by Roger Cook. I know that what I used to do when I used to watch that show when I was younger, before I owned a house, is I would watch that show and then I would think about things I was going to do one day when I owned my own home. That's why HGTV and DIY Network, I believe that's why they took off, right? It was definitely for people that owned houses, but I think there was a lot of us that were younger folks living in apartments, knowing one day we were going to buy a house, and we would watch those shows to get inspired or to dream about the future of home ownership. And Roger Cook was a big part of that. And so I just wanted to honor him and his legacy by bringing him up here. And that's a sad one. So rest in peace, Roger Cook from This Old House. All right, I figured I would come up here in the beginning and talk about who should not seed the lawn. And this is going to be from a little bit of a different perspective than I've done before, because inevitably what happens, I put out a video last week on the Lawn Care Nut channel where I was talking about cool season seeding. And what I did is I took our project lawn from 2021, which was Anthony's house. He's our SEO, SEM director of marketing guy. And I went to his house in West Fargo, and his lawn had been dormant all summer, not watered. He had an irrigation system, but he didn't water because they were in a drought. this and this and that. So you could see the lawn looked terrible. We went over this in last week's podcast, but either way, we rehabbed it. It looked great. Like 3 weeks later, it looks awesome, right? And I just showed, look, guys, you can do this. And I revisited that video in this last week's lawn care nut content. And what I did was I used all the old B-roll from that, and I just wrote a new, I guess, script to kind of talk about it and go over it. Sometimes I do that. I like to repurpose content and talk about it in a new and fresh way, but use the old content. And then I also used a few clips from that that trip that I didn't use in the original video. Either way, it was all about seeding, right? Cool season lawns, rehabbing a cool season lawn with seeding and fertilizing and watering and liquid aeration and hydrotain and all the stuff, right? That was the video. Inevitably, what will happen is when I do that, because I'm a creator that gives warm and cool season lawn advice because I've worked on both, inevitably when I do a video about cool season lawns, I'll get some folks going, hey, do you have a similar video for those of us with St. Augustine grass or with Bermuda or zoysia or Bahia grass or centipede, right? Do you have a video for us? And so I thought I'll talk about that on the podcast. And so it's why we don't seed warm season turf. And that's really what this is about, because I don't really recommend seeding warm season turf. Now, can you? Yes, you can. And if it's something that you want to do because it's a budget thing, then yeah, of course. If you need to seed for a budget reason, then you should seed. If you need to seed because you want the challenge, then go for it. I don't want you to think I'm anti-seed, but what I am is I'm pro best practice. I'm pro giving you the best practice, the best advice that I know, and then you could use that, take it or leave it kind of thing, right? And the best advice that I can always give with warm season turf is not to seed it. And here's why. Let's first compare cool season lawns to warm season lawns. The first one is cool season grass typically grows, it's what's called a bunch type grass. And when I say it's a bunch type grass, what that means is when the seed is planted and it sits there, it'll send down a single root and send up a single grass blade as it gets started, right? And you all know what new grass growing looks like. You'll see those little baby grass seedlings sticking up. All right, it grows that, gets mature. Over time, it's going to send out more roots and it's going to send up more grass blades. And you'll see over the time that it's growing, it will bunch together. So more grass blades will bunch together off of a central plant, or what's called a mother plant. And the bunches get thicker and thicker and thicker. Okay, that is a bunch type grass. That's your typical turf type tall fescue and ryegrass. Those are bunch type grasses. And to an extent, Kentucky bluegrass is also a bunch type grass, although it does have rhizomes or runners. They're pretty slow. And if you've ever grown Kentucky bluegrass from seed, you will see the bunches. You will definitely see the bunches that it grows in from the beginning, and those bunches get thicker. That's bunch type grasses. That's how cool season grasses grow. Because they grow in bunches, though, they can only get so fat. They can only fill in so big of a bare spot. So if you have a bare spot the size of a dining room table, say that a 6x9 dining room table, and it's a complete bare spot, and it's surrounded by thick grass, that will never fill in with cool season grass. Never. Maybe with Kentucky bluegrass in a few years. But there's no way that cool season grass, no matter what you do to it, is going to be able to fill in a 6x9 bare spot just from getting fatter in its bunches. Doesn't work. Now, if it was sporadic throughout and there was bare spots in between sporadic bunches, then yes, it could fill in by feeding it and getting it thicker and fatter. Okay? But when we're going back to that bare spot, cool season lawns, we're going to that bare spot, that 6x9 bare spot, the only way to get grass in there is to sod it or to throw seed in there. And seed is fine. Seed will grow fast with cool season lawns. It takes about, depending if you're doing ryegrass germinates in 3 to 5 days, turf type tall fescue in 10 days, Kentucky bluegrass in 21 to 30. And I know there's a lot of repeat here from previous podcasts, but y'all, repetition is the key to learning, and understanding different grass types helps open up windows of understanding about yours too. So it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to germinate the grass seed, and then 2 to 3 weeks for it to grow to the point where it's what we'll call hardened off and it can be mowed. So it's about a month, 35 days or so, 45 days max for you to have a good stand of seeded grass that grew. 45 days. That's pretty quick. Okay? Now, let's go back and look at warm season turf. Total different thing here. Warm season turf spreads by rhizomes and stolons. They're called runners, and these are extremely aggressive runners. Let's use the example of St. Augustine grass. I can pull runners out of my St. Augustine grass that are several feet long, and they will run several feet in just a period of a few months. Okay? I'm going to have a video coming up of a Bermuda grass lawn that was created from sparse, I don't know, not necessarily clippings. Sparse clippings, I guess would be the way to say it. It went from sparse clippings to dense Bermuda grass in like a few months. I'll put some video up now of a St. Augustine grass lawn that I did a couple years ago where it was destroyed by chinch bug, giant swaths just killed. And within 6 months of just heavy fertilizing, good mowing, and good watering, I had it to be a thick turf stand again of St. Augustine grass because the stolons are aggressive and they will creep several inches per month, several inches. Okay, especially if you're fueling them with nitrogen. Nitrogen drives the bus. Nitrogen fuels the stolons and the rhizomes. Nitrogen pushes the runners. And that's what you want to do. So with warm season turf, because we have our alpha turf grass that's naturally going to spread by these runners like this to take ground, there's no need for seed. Just encourage the existing grass that you have to spread those runners, because that 6x9 bare spot, if it was surrounded by Bermuda or St. Augustine, it would fill in within just a few months, within 60 to 90 days probably in a lot of cases. Again, back to the examples I'm showing on screen. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm showing you an example of a lawn that filled in quickly, a St. Augustine lawn with just being pushed with fert, did it in a few months. So there's no need for seed because we have aggressive stolons. Now you can get grass plugs. Grass plugs are like little cupcakes. They're little mini lawns, and you can plant those in and around and then take advantage of the stolons that they will send out or the rhizomes that they will send out, and you can speed things up. Plant those 16, 18 inches apart, 12 inches apart. That's one strategy, but you already have a plant. If you were to start with seed, you'd have to go all the way back to the seed, right? And that's going to take the 45 to 60 days to grow. And warm season is going to be a little longer than that, but say 45 days to grow just to get to its first little bunch. And then it has to thicken its bunch up, and then it can start sending rhizomes and stolons out. So it's got to go from like scratch all the way up to the phase where it looks like a little plug, and then it can start sending out rhizomes and stolons, right? Whereas if you just buy plugs, or if you just use the existing grass that you have, and you encourage it, it will send out its own rhizomes. And here's another way. That's why you shouldn't seed warm season grass. And here's another way I can illustrate it. On sod farms, we talked about this in the last podcast. On sod farms, when they cut out a field of, it doesn't matter if it's Bermuda, it doesn't matter if it's St. Augustine or Zoysia or Centipede. Bahia is different. We talked about Bahia. But those other aggressive ones, especially Bermuda, Zoysia, St. Augustine, when they cut out of those, they cut out a strip, and then they leave ribbons. They leave living grass in ribbons, and then what they do is once that's all cleared out, you'll have this whole field of just ribbons. And what they'll do is they're relying on those ribbons to start sending stolons out and growing together. They'll grow across and fill in within 12 months. An entire field, they'll strip it clean of nothing but ribbons, and within 12 months it fills back in. All right. And I wonder, I bet they use a lot of nitrogen on sod farms too. They just have a way to keep it all on their farm so it doesn't escape. Either way, what am I getting back to? That's why we don't seed these lawns. Instead, you can buy plugs, or like I said, if you've got grass throughout, push it with nitrogen. That's what you do with a warm season lawn. And so that's the version. If you've seen on YouTube, if you've seen us doing aeration and seeding videos for cool season lawns, how to revive your lawn in 6 weeks, or how to revive your lawn in 3 weeks, like I was doing, right? For the cool season folks with the seeding. If you want to know what to do with the warm season turf, how to revive your lawn, now it won't be 3 weeks, but how to thicken it back up. It's with lots of nitrogen every single month. So use flagship every month as long as we're as long as you're mowing, and you do frequent mowing, and you keep it watered, and you encourage the stolons to grow. Now here's the caveat. The times to grow cool season turf from seed, the best times to do that are spring and fall. I'll put up the chart. You guys have seen it before. These are the growth spurts. Cool season turf naturally grows and goes into a growth spurt in spring and fall. And in the summer, it doesn't grow. It'll stay green, but it doesn't grow as fast. It kind of tries to chill. The humidity and the heat keep it slow. It just tries to make it through. If it's too much, it'll go dormant. But then in spring, or in fall, it'll green back up and it'll start growing again. Spring and fall, that's when you seed. Don't seed in summer. It's not the right time, and obviously not winter. Warm season turf is different. Warm season turf slumbers in spring and fall because the days are shorter. It needs so much more sunlight because those rhizomes and those stolons spread out so far and wide. Those are huge plants. If you think about your lawn that is thousands of these stolons that are several feet long, all woven together, Those are big freaking plants, baby. They need a lot of fuel and they need a lot of nitrogen, but they also need a lot of sunlight because sunlight is what creates photosynthesis, right? You know the whole process of photosynthesis. By the way, if you hear about somebody trying to get money for a carbon capture program by some machines, just tell them to plant a frickin' tree, brother. Anyway, back to it. Photosynthesis needs lots of sun. So for the warm season turf to fuel those stolons and those rhizomes, it needs more sun. And so its main growth spurt is all summer when the days are very long. It's not really about heat, even though it is also adapted to take the heat, but it's really about the length of days. And so therefore warm season turf has adapted to handle heat because it needs the length of days. And like I say, in Florida's a tropical jungle, and the jungle is always trying to retake the land. And our St. Augustine grass especially has those thick stolons that can fight off that freaking jungle, right? That's to keep the weeds out. That's the other advantage to the warm season turf, is filling in those thin spots before the weeds do. At least that's the hope and the prayer. And so if you were going to seed warm season turf, you would not do it in the fall. Just saying. Because I know there's some of you that are going to seed warm season turf, so I want you to understand, you're not going to do it in the fall because you're going into the shorter days. Even if you're in South Florida, Miami, where you still have warm temperatures all summer long, even where all winter long, even where I live in Bradenton, we're South Florida. Somebody took me to task one time when I said Bradenton was South Florida. Like, stop calling Bradenton South Florida. I'm like, bro, where is the University of South Florida located, brother? It's in freaking Tampa, north of me, okay? University of South Florida is in Tampa, so blame the educators if they don't know what South Florida is. Either way, even where I'm at in South Florida, you could grow grass seed in the winter. In fact, I did grow Bermuda over the winter in St. Pete a couple years ago because the temperatures are there. They're fine. What you're missing is the length of days. So you'll get it to germinate, but there's not enough sunlight for it to really do anything. And it could end up it could just end up petering out. Or what'll happen actually is, because you're still watering it during the winter a lot, is weeds that are adapted to grow in the shorter days will just destroy your Bermuda. And that's what happened to me when I did. Didn't destroy it, but they definitely hurt it. I had to use a lot of herbicide. So you don't seed, if you're going to seed warm season turf, don't do it in the fall. Days are too short. Don't do it in the early spring. Days are too short. Do it in the late spring, early summer, right as you're coming into those long days. In fact, go look at a calendar, and whenever the days get over 12 and a half hours of day length, that's when you want to seed your warm season turf. It's going to be like late spring or something. I think there's a website called SunCalc, SUNCALC. That's the one I used to use. It'll tell you the length of days. I think that's the one. But either way, you would seed warm season turf. You'd do that in the late spring, early summer, never in the fall. Not enough time. And the last thing is St. Augustine grass has no seed. You'll get seed heads on St. Augustine grass, but that's not viable seed. They can't harvest viable seed from St. Augustine grass. It can only be propagated vegetatively from current existing plants that you plant in the ground like a plug, and then you let it spread its stolons. That's the only way it can, which I think is kind of a supernatural power, that this grass can rejuvenate itself, rejuvenate a whole lawn. That's freaking cool, man. You know what I mean? That's like biblical power right there, I think. So there's my little... I guess hopefully that helps you if you have warm season turf. Hopefully it helps you. Now, I do have a course that you can take. It's $7. It is called yardcarebootcamp.com. Yardcarebootcamp.com. Just go there. Watch the little video, and below there's a code you put in for $7, and it'll give it to you for $7. It's video training, and I go into a lot of this type of strategy, and I talk a lot about cool season and warm season lawns. I want you to learn both. And for those of you that live up north but have a vacation house down south, you'll get the training of both. Or if you're moving down here, retiring like all the rest of you from New York have already retired down here, and you need to learn about warm season turf, $7, yardcarebootcamp.com. It'll be a good experience for you. It's video training. It's the closest you can get to having me to coach you. All right, and it's $7. Pass it on to your friends. If you have friends that go, hey, how did you get your lawn so great? And you've been watching my stuff, and you want to give them a one-stop shop, then tell them to go to yardcarebootcamp.com, pay the $7. I promise you. We also have I promise you they'll get a lot out of it. We also have a private message board in there that only me and one other person staff. So I answer a good 50% of the questions, and my admin in there, he does the others. His name's Scott. He does a great job. But it's so if you have specific questions, when you pay that $7, you get access to that, and we'll answer your questions if you have them. But you got to go through the course first, because the course really does a good job at answering all of your questions. So yardcarebootcamp.com, check it out, get signed up today, get some education, because I know it'll give you the confidence to take action and have success on the lawn. Okay, I want to talk about something that comes up a lot this time of year. We're actually going to have two topics that we talk about. The first one is pre-germinating grass seed. Now, let me just say, I have never tried pre-germinating grass seed. I understand that why people would do it and that it could be a good practice. And so what I want to do is I want to just give you my opinions on it. I watched Jordan's video on it from the Lawn Tools. I watched Lawn Lab's video on it, and I watched Connor Ward, the Lawn Rebels version of it. So I'll try. If you're on YouTube, I'll link all those. I'm not going to like react to those or anything, but I might show some clips from them. So I want to make sure they get links. And I want to just say every one of these videos is excellent. All I'm going to do is talk about some of the questions that I have. Like if I was going to go and try being someone who's done a lot of traditional seeding, lots. I have so many videos on seeding. We've seeded bare lawns. We've done aeration overseeding. Like I said, when I worked for True Green, the way I became an expert at seeding, and I will say that I'm an expert at growing grass seed. I will say that. The way that I became an expert at it is when I worked in the Maryville branch for True Green, I was the operations manager. We would burn some lawns. And I always went out and fixed them. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I actually did quite a few lawn fixes when I was in Crestwood too. It was a lot of fun for me. One time we torched some bent grass. A guy had a whole backyard of bent grass, and he was in South Chicago Heights. No, maybe what's south of that? Crete? There's a golf course in Crete. He was on that golf course down there, and he had a whole backyard of bent grass. And our technicians, he had weed control. I don't know which one it was, but he blanket sprayed the backyard, and it killed the bent grass, whatever the weed control was. I mean, it zorched it to orange. I wish I had pictures for y'all. Anyway, that was my first big seeding job, and that was an aerate the piss out of it and seed the piss out of it, and then aerate the piss out of it again, and then cover it with peat moss job, which is still my favorite way to seed. And we scalped down the old stuff, so we left all the old stuff there. We just seeded into it. Now, probably today, if I could remember where that lawn was, that backyard's probably all bent grass again. But anyway, that was my greatest triumph at True Green. But that's where I learned a lot, was fixing all of the burned lawns that we did. Some small patches, some big, some in between, some done with this or that, whatever. I did all those fixes, and so I learned a lot about it. Those are traditional ways of seeding. I think this pre-germination thing, I think it's pretty new. I had not heard about it before either way. Or maybe it was something they did only in specialty situations in the past, and now that there's an internet, those specialty situations are coming out. So I think it's cool, and I definitely can see that it works. I can see some of the advantages to it being, I guess I should explain what pre-germinating grass seed is, because you're on a podcast here. So what pre-germinating is you guys know, I've talked till I'm dead in the face that especially Kentucky bluegrass, that it takes 21 days for it to germinate. And so when you throw that out on a lawn, no matter what you do, even if you were to slit or slice seed and actually push the seed down into the ground, which is the best way to seed, is to slit or slice seed. Okay, haven't done content on that. I have slice seeded before. In fact, my backyard in Indiana was all slit seeded. We had a big old giant machine back in those days. And it had air that would you go down and inject. Anyway, long and short of that, we use that to fix lawns too. That's the best way to seed: slit seeding, or slice seeding. But that's a machine that a lot of people are not going to rent. Second best way is my aerate the piss out of it and overseed deal. But those are traditional ways of seeding, and no matter what you do, it takes 21 days for Kentucky bluegrass to germinate. So slice seeding is good because it gets the seed down into the soil to give your seed to soil contact. It also should be more moist down in there because it's just down lower, and you're going to water down there, and the moisture won't get evaporated, and you're going to have some coverings over top. And then the third thing is it should not be able to wash out as easy. One of the biggest things, any of you that have seeded, one of the biggest problems you have is washouts, especially if you're down to bare dirt. Which are the toughest ways to seed. The toughest way to seed is on bare dirt. It just is. And it's because of washout. You're going to get a gully washer at some point, no matter where you live, and it's going to just wash giant chasms out. Even if you use the straw mats, hydro seeding can even have, in the hardest storms, can get washed out, right? Sod, even under sod. All right, you get what I'm saying. Gully washers are your biggest enemy. So by having the seed buried, you kind of going to hedge your bets a little bit. It's going to help keep the seed in place. But for 21 days, you're asking a lot. Now, if you're doing perennial rye that germinates in 3 or 4 days, I'll take my chances on the 3 or 4 days. And I say germinate in root. It's got to get down in root so it can hold on to itself. So it is more than 3 or 4 days, but with Kentucky bluegrass, it's even longer, right? So this is why pre-germinating could be a good idea. Pre-germinating, you're basically soaking the seed in the water for those 3 weeks, those 21 days ahead of time, so that it just germinates and starts to push out, so that when you spread it, it's already got this little root hair out and it's already got a little top growth out. So when it seats onto the soil, now it can just start going up again. You start watering, it's like, oh yeah, okay, cool, there's soil here now. So you're kind of almost germinating it hydroponically. I think that's the term. And even I've seen some of these guys, they'll even grow it a little bit to a point of hydroponic, and then they get it out and spread it. Okay. So I definitely see an advantage there if you're worried about the gully washout. Or if you don't have an irrigation setup that you think is adequate to cover your grow in, then pre-germinating can help with that as well. So I can see some advantages, and there's probably others. But those would be the main ones that I would see to that. Disadvantages, man, that's a lot changing that water out, because as Jesse illustrates, and I think he's probably got the most popular video, Jesse from Lawn Life, or the most views, and he illustrates that you have to change the water out every 12 hours. Something comes out of the seed, leaches from the seed and gets into the water that can end up killing the seedlings if it germinates in there, or maybe kill the seed. It's something's emitted. So you have to change the water out. It's like fish, man, like fish pissing in water. You got to change that water out after a while. It's like a similar thing. So you gotta change the water out every 12 hours. So imagine changing water out every 12 hours for 2 or 3 weeks. That's a commitment right there. So that's a challenge. Another challenge is that the seed is wet. You're doing this pre-germination. They pre-germinated in these mesh bags. So when you're done with that process and you're ready to on your seed day, it's still going to be some moisture in there. So you got to mix it with something else. They mix it with Milorganite or humic acid. Milorganite seems to be the most popular way. So now you got to get into a wheelbarrow and you got to pour out all your grass seed. And now you also have to mix in Milorganite to dry it out as a carrier to get it to spread. Now at this point now, you got to think it's not as easy to measure out the poundage of the seed. I don't know. The other thing is I don't know that I've seen anyone actually do the pre-germinated grass seed, mix it with the Milorganite, show themselves pouring it into the spreader, and then do video of it actually spreading. Because I have to believe it's going to clump. No matter how much Milorganite you put in there to dry it all out and carry it out, I have to believe if you got little root hairs out everywhere, or even if you didn't go that long, even if it's just damp seed, man, I got to think it's gonna clump. I just do. And so if you guys have a video that somebody's made where they've shown them actually using a spreader, a cheap Scott spreader like everyone has, or maybe an Earthway, which I don't know. I don't think any of them are made to spread any type of damp material, period. If you ask anybody that's done fertilizing for a living, the biggest enemy to a good application is damp material, right? Because it clumps. So that would be something I'd be curious about, is did they get any clumping with this pre-germination? All right, so let me give you some other thoughts that I had on this. You probably are not going to pre-germinate grass seed if you're putting down a blend. You'd only want to do this with 100% single cultivar grass seed. Let me tell you why. The majority of mixes that you all are going to buy, and by the way, I would think pre-germinating grass seed would only be for a burn down and start over project too. You're not going to do that for overseeding. I hope y'all have just ruled that out. I don't see any help there, because something that's pre-germinated, is that even going to get seed to soil contact? I don't know. Either way, let's go back to my point. Most of you are going to be buying mixes that are a mix of Kentucky bluegrass and perennial ryegrass. That is by far the most popular blend. Sometimes it's a 50-50. Sometimes it's a 60% rye, 40% Kentucky blue. 80-20 is probably the most popular. 80% rye, 20% Kentucky blue. That's like the most popular. If you're going to do that, though, you're not going to pre-germinate that, because the rye that's in the mix is going to germinate in 3 to 5 days, and the Kentucky blue at 21 days. How are you going to pre-germinate that? Your ryegrass, you could picture it, right? The ryegrass is going to be fully grown by the 21 days that the Kentucky bluegrass is just getting started. So you're not going to pre-germinate mixed. Even if you had a blend of 3 different turf-type tall fescues, I probably wouldn't do that. 3 cultivars of turf-type tall fescue, because typically, what if one germinates at 8 days, one germinates at 9, and one at 12? you see what I'm saying? The one that germinated at 8 is going to be fully growing while the one at 12 is just barely starting. Now you have different sized materials that you're mixing in. So I wouldn't do that. So I would recommend, if you're going to do it, only do it if it's a 100% pure single cultivar grass seed, which is going to really narrow down those of you doing that, because most of you don't do that. So that was a thought I had. Another one I had, it kind of goes back to, I alluded to this before, it's a commitment to change that water out every 12 hours. But, you know, you're dealing with something in nature here. So it's not like it's going to be exactly 21 days that this is going to happen. So, you know, you guys got day jobs and stuff. So you do this on a Saturday. You do your first pre-germination on a Saturday. You're changing out your water every 12 hours for the next 2 weeks. But let's say all of a sudden on day 17, you got germination. You're like, oh my gosh, but now it's a Tuesday and your TPS reports are due tomorrow, right? Are you going to seed that night when you get home, or are you going to do the TPS reports? That's what I'm saying. You're taking a chance that the grass seed is going to dictate to you that it's ready to go at a time when you're not. So that to me is another risk, again, because I just said you're going to buy a single cultivar grass seed, so that's going to be an expensive grass seed that you're getting. And on top of that, now you gotta live at its mercy. And when it says it's ready to go, not when you do, and not the ideal time. And what if you're in the midst of a 2 or 3 day rainstorm and it says, I'm ready to go? Well, you're not going to seed in the storm. So now you got to wait the extra 3 days until your rainstorm is done, right? How are you going to do your burn down in conjunction with this, not knowing the timing? I don't know. I see too many challenges for me, okay? For me, that I would rather do what I know works. And again, I realize that my methodology is old school. And what I know works is slice seeding or aerate the piss out of it, seed and aerate the piss out of it and put coverings over it. Or hydro seed. Hydro seed is awesome. So I would really stick to that type strategy rather than the pre-germination strategy if it was me. My final opinion is, and I'm not saying anything about these creators here, but I bet if I talk to them, I bet at least one or two would say, yeah, you know, I more did that for the views and not necessarily because it's something that I would do in my own lawn. That's a guess. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a viable strategy. It obviously works. Maybe for a small area, I would think it would be ideal. One of these guys, I think it might have been Jesse, ended up doing a small area where he just spread by hand. Now, I actually think that could be ideal. 6x9 patch. Hey, I'm going to pre-germinate some grass seed, put it in there. That, I think, is the perfect scenario for pre-germinating grass. Something you can do by hand. Something that you can keep your hands on, that is small enough that you can hand water it, you can baby it, you can babysit it. I think pre-germinating grass seed is perfect for that. But when it comes to an overall doing a 5,000 square foot lawn, man, I just see, man, I mean, you watch Connor's video, he got a lot of, and Jordan's too, they got a lot of buckets of seed. You know what I mean? That's a lot to deal with. What's your investment in buckets? $300 in Ace buckets? I mean, if you got a boat, you always need an extra bucket, but man. So there you go, is my little riff on it. You guys, if you're on YouTube, leave me your comments below. Tell me, have you pre-germinated grass seed, and what do you think about it? All right, here's a fun question. Came up on our Florida Lawn Care Nuts group. If you're in Florida, welcome you to join our Florida Lawn Care Nuts group. I'm very active in that one, obviously. Listen to this question came in. So for weed and feed products, wouldn't the fertilizer help with the growth of the weeds in the meantime? I thought it would make more sense to kill the weeds first and then use fertilizer afterwards. So I get this question a lot. Now that's for weed and feed products, which you guys know I don't really recommend weed and feed products. And the reason I don't recommend a weed and feed product is because typically your lawn is not 100% weeds. Typically the weeds are in zones, areas, or spots. And I would prefer to keep the chemical, the IDEs to a minimum. That's called integrated pest management. Only use the hard control, the chemical, where it's needed and nowhere else. With a weed and feed, I can't do that because it's a granular product that you're going to put into the spreader. You want the fertilizer to be blanketed, right? Because you want all of the lawn to be fed. And so what they do with weed and feed products is they put herbicide granules in there at the same time, and those spread over the entire lawn 100%. So you're spreading herbicides in areas where there are no weeds. Yes, you're also spreading them on the weeds, but then in between the big zones or areas where there are no weeds, you're also spreading the herbicide there. And I just don't think that that's the best practice. Does it work? Yes. Do I say it's bad? No. The products have received a label from the jurisdiction that they're sold in that says these are fine to use here. So the powers that be in the state that is sold have said, sure, this is fine. This is safe. You can do this. So they do it. I have no problem that way. But for me, I'm just going to do something that I think is a little bit better. The other thing is with weed and feed is that is a granular weed control. And in the most cases, I prefer weed control that can work through the plant by being sprayed in a liquid systemically. So it's this way. The herbicides that we use in lawns are systemic. And when I say systemic, what that means is they need to get inside the plant to disrupt some of the biological function in that plant. That's what they do. They're disruptors. And when they disrupt a part of the growth of the plant, it dies. There's all these systems. Your body's the same way. You have lungs, you have a heart, you have bowels, you have a colon, you have all of these systems, right? The circulatory system, I'm gonna go back to show you that I don't know anatomy. But let's just say one of the systems in your body stops. Let's say your heart stops. Well, the whole thing dies, right? Not like the lungs go, well, we'll just keep going. No, they all are tied together. If your lungs stop working, your heart will die. They're all tied together. If your bowels stop working, you'll die too, by the way. That would not be a pleasant way to go. So all of the systems work together, same in the plant. So when you hit it with a weed control, a herbicide, it's going to intercept or disrupt some system, some function inside the plant, and therefore the whole plant will die. So that means it's got to get inside to do that, okay? Doesn't burn it down from the outside. There are products that do that, but that's not what the ones we use in lawns do. They're systemic. They get inside. So there's two ways to get inside. Number one is they can go up through the roots, and that's what typically will happen with the granular weed and feed product is the granular gets down into the soil. You got to water that in, and then it gets around the roots. The roots take it in, and it starts to do its disruption. That's pretty slow, and it's not as effective in a lot of cases, okay, in my opinion. To me, what's more effective is to spray the plant with a liquid and to wet the plant completely on its leaves with the herbicide and have the herbicide soak in through every single green tissue on the plant. That is much quicker. It's much more efficient. It uses much less chemical because you're spraying it from a wand that you control, that you're only spraying where there's weeds and you shut it off where there are no weeds. So it's super efficient. It's less chemical. It works faster and it works better. Now, are there exceptions? Yeah, there are weed and feed, granular weed and feeds that I recommend here in Florida in the winter. Whole different animal. We're not talking about that now. We're talking about traditional weed and feeds that all the rest of you, all the grit-eating world uses. The weed and feed I just mentioned, the weed and feed that you put down in the spring because it's going to feed the lawn and kill the weeds at the same time. Do they work? Yes. Are there better ways to do it? I just illustrated that definitely, yes, there are better ways, in my opinion. Okay, that's what we're talking about when we talk about weed and feed products, and I don't recommend them. But back to the question. The question is, when you do the weed and feed, does the feed part also feed the weed? We should make a t-shirt out of that. Does the feed feed the weed? And the answer is yes, it does. The weeds like the fertilizer just as much as they like, or just as much as the lawn does. Let me say that again. The weeds like the fertilizer. They love the nitrogen just as much as your turf grass does. And sometimes more because they're adapted to grow taller, faster, wider, stronger, fatter. You know what I mean? Some of them, they have other adaptations that the nitrogen really makes them go. But here's the thing. When you weed at the same time, the actively growing weed from that nitrogen will move the herbicide through itself faster because it's growing faster. And so its systems are working faster inside. So by feeding at the same time as you weed control, as you put down herbicide, you end up getting better results on the weeds. And so that's why weed and feeds work. But that's also why, and I hope you understand why, because it's growing fast. The herbicide works systemically inside. The weed is actively growing and moving itself around and going, whoa, we just got fed, baby. We're flying. And then that means that herbicide gets through a lot faster and kills it faster. Now, that's why, now again, I don't recommend weed and feed products, but that's why and how they work. What I recommend you do is feed your lawn with my fertilizer like Flagship or Stress Blend. So that's, of course, I run a business, not a charity, so I'm going to recommend you use my fertilizer. Fertilize the lawn, get it growing, and then right afterwards, after you water it in, then go spot spray the weeds with liquid weed control. Okay, and this is all in my books. This is all in my training. I show you what weed controls to get no matter what your grass type is, warm or cool season lawn. I recommend you get a concentrate, you mix it in a pump sprayer, and you spot spray or zone spray with that pump sprayer. Do that right after you feed. So put down your flagship, water it in, and then the next day go spray the weeds because of that exact reason. Except now you're using a liquid that's going to work a lot faster, and it's going to be even better. So long and the short of it is, this is a great question. It's one we get often, and I think the answer probably surprised you that yes, it does help, and we want it to help because it gets the herbicides in faster. All right, here's a question that came up. This one's pretty important because we're seeing a lot of armyworm across the country after that hurricane went through. What was the name of it? It wasn't Debbie. It wasn't a hurricane. It was a tropical storm. Either way, the one that dumped all the rain, it went through Florida here, and then it went up into the Carolinas. And when that happens, it carries a lot of bugs. Bugs get carried on the wind, and in this case, it's been sod webworm or armyworm. To me, those are the same thing. Sod webworm are really bad right now in Florida, and armyworm are pretty bad across a lot of Georgia and up into the Carolinas and that. And you're going to see it on Bermuda grass really bad. And so if you see it, the first thing is you don't really need to panic necessarily because sod webworm mostly kill the top growth. And so once you eliminate the problem and you feed nitrogen, the grass will grow back. The challenge you face is if you get to it too late and your days are too short and the Bermuda's slowed down. But either way, I wanted to talk about products because somebody asked, what's the best product from the local big box stores to kill sod webworm? And a lot of folks in the comments, this was on one of our Facebook groups, were saying, get a Celiprin, get a Celiprin. And they say the word like use pro grade, use professional products, a Celiprin. And that's great. A Celiprin, the active ingredient in a Celiprin is chlorantraniliprole. I pronounce it chlorantraniliprole. Okay, that is the active ingredient. That is great for grubs. Okay, that's the big one that people are using for grubs now. We used to use imidacloprid, which you still can use and still works, but I guess there's some resistant grubs around the country, and so they moved to chlorantraniliprole. It's also got a little bit less negativity associated with it. The imidacloprid was associated with problems with bees. It's a neonicotinoid, and it was associated with hive decline in bees, whereas the chlorantraniliprole is said to be a little bit, I don't know the words, but it doesn't have that stigma amongst the people that care about those things. So that's cool. And so a Celiprin is what they're using. The other thing is a Celiprin, I think, doesn't have to be watered in either. It doesn't have to be watered in, or it does, but it's got more fudge factor in that in some regard. Either way, it's used for a lot of other things. And in the case of sod webworm, yes, if you spray the liquid Celiprin, that's a great way to kill sod webworm or armyworm. But I'll just tell you, pretty much every insecticide kills them. Bifenthrin will kill them. I don't know any others off the top of my head, but they're easy to kill. If you go to the big box store and you look at the bags there, they all will say sod webworm and armyworm. Every single one of them. I think even 7. Sound like there was a fire alarm going off. I think even 7 is labeled to kill them. That's got a different active in it, but they must be testing the fire alarms around here. Hey, I'm trying to do a podcast over here. Okay, I don't know if you can hear that on the thing here, but it's I'm just going to go through it. Back to it. Going to the big box store, pretty much everything will kill them, okay? So that's one thing. The other thing about it, though, is you want to get something that has some residual to it because sod webworm and armyworm can have multiple generations. And so while you're seeing, you might find the moths there, or you might find the worms, or you might find both because sometimes you'll have multiple generations overlapping. So you might spray with something, but if it doesn't have a residual, you'll need to repeat a couple weeks later. That's like with bifenthrin typically. But with chlorantraniliprole or a Celiprin, it does have residual. Okay, so you can spray that one time and it'll have residual. It has residual mostly for the year. And in fact, if you've treated for grubs earlier in the season, you should still be okay against armyworm and or sod webworm. Although there could still be breakthrough because you had a hurricane that dropped 20 inches of rain. That's one of those events that can, wash away the residual of that chemical. But for sure, a Celiprin, a chlorantraniliprole, is something that you can and should use because it has a little bit of a residual for that next generation that'll be coming along in a couple weeks. Now, as far as the term, go get the professional product, that's where I want you to learn about active ingredients. So Acelepryn is a professional product. That's a brand name. But the active ingredient I said is chlorantraniliprole. All you have to do is go to the big box store and look at the active ingredient on the product you're looking at, whether it's a liquid Hosen sprayer or a granular, and look for chlorantraniliprole. Now, I will tell you that, and it'll be the same. Scott's Drawbacks is chlorantraniliprole, is what I'm getting at. It's the same as the granular Acelepryn. Here's the thing. When you're going after sod webworm or armyworm, because they're mostly on top of the turf, you're going to get a faster knockdown or a faster kill if you use a liquid. So that's where the Acelepryn comes in. All right, and the Acelepryn liquid, you have to invest in it up front, but it's actually pretty cheap because the use rate's so low. So I would recommend, if you're having a big issue with them, get a liquid. But if you don't have that availability, you can't get it for whatever reason, then get the granular at the box store. Get chlorantraniliprole. Scott's Drawbacks is fine. It's labeled for sod webworm and armyworm. You can see it on there. Or you can get whatever else at the store that has that active ingredient in it and use that, because you know it'll work and you know it'll give you some residual. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there, that a lot of times the stuff that's the professional stuff is actually the exact same thing as in the box store, and sometimes it's the exact same concentrations as well. Okay, it's just under a different brand name, that the company that created that active ingredient, they're just licensing it out to other brands other than the name of Acelepryn. They're licensing it out to Scott's to sell as Drawbacks. And that's something that's important for you to know, because that can help you save money, but it can also help you get products faster sometimes if you can't get something online. All right, let's go back and talk about seeding since it's that time of the year. I've had a few questions come up where people ask, hey, Alan, do you need to dethatch before you overseed? So back to my strategy that I typically teach y'all is that warm season or cool season turf that you're going to mechanically aerate and overseed, or if you're not going to mechanically aerate, you don't have to, you can overseed. What if there's thatch there? Okay, so you got to think about it. I watch a lot of videos of guys doing aeration overseed, and I see them dethatching first, but and a lot of times I would just ask, why are you even overseeding? Your lawn is so thick. Like I see lawns that are really thick and people are overseeding. And I'm like, no, go ahead and dethatch if you want. Pull the debris and material out of there if you think that's what you need to do. But why are you overseeding? Your lawn is already so thick. So that's the first thing I ask is, if you have a thatch problem, is your lawn thick? And if so, don't even bother with seeding. Go ahead and dethatch, but don't seed. Just dethatch and then fertilize the crap out of it so it'll thicken back up, right? But if your lawn is thin and you do have a layer of dead grass laying down, in that case, we're not going to really call it thatch. By the way, that's the other thing. If your lawn's been dormant in the summer and you haven't been watering it, you're not going to be able to necessarily tell the difference in thatch and dormant grass. So that's another challenge, you know what I'm saying? But all in all, and I guess down to answer the question, if you think you have a lot of thatch there that's going to block the seed, then by all means, you should dethatch first. Okay, I just have not seen a lot of cases where a lawn is overall thin that it also has a thatch problem. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Typically, thin lawns don't have a thatch problem. It's thicker lawns that have a thatch problem because they're too crowded, right? Thinner lawns usually have dirt and thin grass and weeds because thatch doesn't necessarily hang on. If the grass starts to thin out, the thatch doesn't hang on. It just blows away, gone. It takes a thick lawn to hold the thatch in place. And that's the balance. That's that ecosystem of the rhizosphere. Is the thatch is a part of that, right? And there's a lot of living things in that thatch layer, and then right in the soil right below, and then you have the root zone. That's that rhizosphere. That's a balance, and that needs to be in balance. And when it's not in balance because the grass is thin, that rhizosphere breaks down, and all the living things, the bacteria and the biology that are in that. And the fungi that are in that thatch, they die because their ecosystem is out of balance. So they all die, and the thatch flattens all out and blows away in the wind. Okay, that's how that works. So that's why I guess I've never really addressed dethatching at the same time as overseeding, because it doesn't seem to be a problem that I've encountered due to what I just illustrated there. Now, again, if you do have a layer of dead stuff, then yeah, if it's going to stop your seed to soil contact, then you got to do something about that. Now, dethatching may not be the best thing. I would go back and rent the aerator and aerate the crap out of it. Poke holes, poke holes, poke holes. Go across it east and west, north and south, diagonal, aerate it 4 or 5 times, overseed, throw your starter fert down, aerate it again. You know what I mean? Do it. Poke holes, baby. Get the most out of your 4 hours. Kick your ass. Makes the beer taste better. Okay? Do that. That will be enough to break up the thatch and get things going and get things moving. You know, and then all that watering you're doing, that's going to help to push things around and get stuff settled. So that's kind of how I think about that. You guys let me know again in the comments if you're on YouTube. Let me know if you've seen any other examples of that, or if you've come across a need to have to dethatch before you seed. And there goes the fire alarm again. All right, y'all, I think I'm going to end the podcast there. A little bit shorter than normal this week, but I hope I got some good information out to you. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, if you're watching this on the Labor Day weekend, we do have a sale going on Yard Mastery, 10% off all the Greene County fertilizer products, as well as 10% off all of our fertilizers, some grass seeds on sale too, soil test kits, a couple other things. Go check it out. I'll leave you links below, or just go to yardmastery.com and look for the big Labor Day sale. Get stocked up for the fall. I hope you guys are having a great time. This is that time of year when I used to live in Indiana. I would go out now. I would start going out because we're at the end of August, early September, and you start thinking about fall, right? And my big thing was fall mums. I'm going to go get my fall mums and plant them. And so I kind of understand we're getting into that. And a lot of y'all are starting to come back to lawn care now. Your kids are back in school. And so you're like, all right, I'm going to get back into the lawn now. So I hope these podcasts are encouraging you to do that, to get out there and take action and get your lawn looking good for the fall. And I hope you enjoy the time out in the lawn as much as I do. So with that, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you in the lawn.